Love you to death. Debts is a podcast, not a radio show.
We are live, and Scott Greenberg is telling us that he's part of Debts No Honest Man Can Pay from Charlotte, North Carolina, originally from the Motor City along with me. He's the host of a podcast called Debts No Honest Man Can Pay. Amy Rock out of Nashville, Tennessee, my former colleague at WTTU. Also out of Nashville, Tennessee, Rick Quinn, our curator and host for tonight, and Gus Creeder, our youngest member from here in Cookeville, Tennessee, journalist at the Tennessee Tech Oracle student newspaper. Scott Winchell has been in radio and in many other things in music at many different levels for his whole life. A lot of us are also blogging. I'm the host and teacher on the radio when I feel like doing a radio show, but I blog over there as well. And we are just the Music Nerds Collaborative, and this is our fourth Music Nerds Record Club, and the topic for tonight, the 1998, our fourth one, and the topic for tonight, we did January, February, March, April is 4.
No, but the album didn't come out in 98, it was 88.
1988, yes. Did I say 9?
Yes.
I meant 8, yes. 1988, when I was 20 years old. Let's bring Rick Quinn. I'll take everybody else off the screen. Rick's going to take us away and tell us all about it.
All right. Thank you. And I'm so excited about this conversation tonight over Public Enemy's sophomore smash. It Takes a Nation of Millions to hold us back. There are several ways that I could approach this, but I tell you what, I'm wanting to do is just offer some thoughts about the impact that it had on me and stay under my allotted time, because I'm really excited about hearing from my colleagues and their reactions to this classic album. Right out the gate, after an announcement that Armageddon is at hand, you hear the sonorous, moral serious voice of Malcolm X saying, "Too black, too strong." Introducing Bring the Noise, the first full track on this album. Malcolm's words are sampled here as a mimicking of Public Enemy's white critics who reacted to their debut, Yo, Bum Rush the Show, the way whites often do when confronted with systemic racial injustice. They tend to tone police. Public Enemy not only repeats the criticism using Malcolm's voice, they reappropriate it in the context of their song as a badge of honor. Too black, too strong becomes a reiteration of the sandwich board signs worn by civil rights marchers stating, "I am a man." It's a verbal declaration of full, unashamed blackness and personhood, like Public Enemy's hype man, Flavor Flav, tells Chuck D, "Show them how we can do this." The gauntlet has been thrown down and there's no looking back. My introduction to Public Enemy came in a roundabout way. I was exposed to their music through the movie Less Than Zero, an adaptation of Bret Easton Ellis's 1985 novel that looks at nihilism and decadence among white upper-class youth in LA. But the soundtrack was by Def Jam Records, and a young Rick Rubin was co-producing it and got Public Enemy's Bring the Noise on there. And that's how I was introduced to their music. A year later, with Spike Lee's classic Do the Right Thing, I was baptized by fire by this intense group. So I was challenged and hooked. As a way of just introducing this for me and then turning it over to my colleagues, I want the primary focus to be it's important to me as a white listener, threading the needle between appropriating without understanding and carefully listening to many manifestos that aren't about me, but demand a response, accountability, and action. Chuck D famously referred to rap as the Black CNN, an essential form of media from and to a particular social location. It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back is an unapologetic address for full participation and unbowing resistance to critics. For my generation, I think that when we grew up with color TVs, but everything we saw about the civil rights movement was in black and white footage. Made it seem like it was eons ago when really we were only a little over 2 decades removed from it. So the experiencing Public Enemy on this record stirred me out of my complacency into the rich complexity of the post-civil rights generation, specifically as it related to New York City, and where Howard Beach, Bernie Goetz, multiple other examples gave complex pushback to the notion that America's promissory note to its black citizens had in any way been wholly paid back in terms of justice and full personhood. Public Enemy's intensity, their iconography, beats, samples, and lyrics was an education for me in Black nationalism, Black pride, Black Marxism, where James Brown, Funkadelic, Khalid Abdul Muhammad, Marcus Garvey, Louis Farrakhan, Huey Newton, Fannie Lou Hamer, just to name a few, are brought into conversation with the two sides of this vinyl, and my own blinders were exposed. The lyrics helped me and continue to help me see the dehumanization that racism engenders and that I participate in. And with that, I'm going to just leave it there and bask in the insights of my colleagues.
I really can't come close to what Rick said, so I'm going to focus on other aspects of It Takes a Nation of Millions. My first exposure to PE was Don't Believe the Hype, and that's a great way to be introduced to PE. And then my next serious exposure to PE was the summer of 1989 when Fight the Power was ubiquitous, and just it's a song that just its power keeps growing. But let's dial it back to It Takes a Nation of Millions. I know a lot of times people like to place a lot of the weight of Public Enemy on Chuck D, and make no mistake, Chuck D is that anchor of Black CNN, as referred to in Rick's comments earlier. But Flavor Flav, I'm like, yeah, at one point he eventually turned into a reality star person, but Flavor Flav is just like the template of how to be a hype man. There was no better hype man than Flavor. He was funny, but he was energetic, and he was just as literate and just as erudite as Chuck D. But you know, he played his role. The Bomb Squad, just the production techniques of the Bomb Squad, like you knew that you were listening to a Public Enemy record. There was no doubt about it. And everything, that's just when you've got a band that has its own unique sound, from the cadences of the rhymes to the way that the samples are layered. It just, you know, you've got lightning in a bottle. I also feel that it's important for me to note that a couple of the key tracks on Public Enemy I wasn't exposed to until I heard cover versions of them. One being Bring the Noise, the version that Public Enemy did with Anthrax, which in a lot of ways I kind of sort of like better because it's got a little bit more oomph, but both versions are great. And I never heard Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos until I heard Tricky's version. Then it was really cool to go back and compare and contrast the two. Listening to it again, I haven't listened to this in years, but it was cool to like rediscover things, especially the track at the end, Party for Your Right to Fight, which is just a brilliant way of turning the Beastie Boys party anthem on its head by like infusing it with some important messaging. This album is chock full of bangers. And another thing I love about it is that there's very little in the way of extraneous material. Even just the instrumental that is in homage to Security of the First World. It's a dope beat. And that's another thing that's cool, is that they take time out to do a track that highlights flavor. There's a track that highlights Terminator X for the SW1s. But, you know, the one thing that plagued a lot of hip hop albums is like the interstitial skits, and there's none of that bullshit there, which is great because I can kind of see Chuck D going, yeah, none of that skit bullshit. And I don't know, I'm not a Public Enemy academist, so maybe there have been sketches or skits on other PE albums. They're not here, and one of the reasons, among many, why I love it. If you're not familiar with this record, if you're a fan of hip hop, if you're somebody who's struggled with hip hop, there's a lot of people who just are out there and they discount certain musical genres, and that makes me sad for them because they're missing out a lot. There's a lot of people out there like, I like everything except for hip hop and country. I'm like, well, you're missing out on a lot. And if you're one of those people who says, I don't like hip hop, I implore you to check out It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. And I cede my time.
Thank you, Scott. And yeah, I was one of those people that didn't get what rap was about. So I took the extra time to listen to this album a few times to really sit with and get past all the context and baggage I have around it. Because to me, rap was the talentless parodies I saw on TV, or worse, I listened to the Christian music version of 90s rap, DC Talk. That's what I thought rap was. So when I first listened to this album, the beats reminded me of what I thought sounds dated and cheap. But I sat with it and remembered this is the original. And there really is a lot more creativity in the production than I thought there would be. I honestly love the funky beats that are in there. And I deeply envy folks who got to hear this record when it was truly fresh. My personal favorite single track off this album is She Watched Channel Zero. Lyrically, it's one of the more light and cheerful songs on here. I'll admit it's about like watching garbage television isn't that good. Maybe it's a bit tongue-in-cheek in there too, but I like it because the hook is really cool. I like that they use a Slayer sample. And that's another context that I can't get my head around. Like, using samples was so challenging and revolutionary. I grew up listening to Girl Talk, who was trying to push boundaries by using exclusively samples. It did take me a few spins of the record to forget about how memified Flavor Flav was. When I was growing up, it was white kids running around going, yeah, boy, and it means nothing. But to sit with it in context, I started to really dig Flavor Flav's hype man energy. I actually got to see Public Enemy at a festival in 2011 and had zero context of why that was cool. I just knew it would impress people someday. Are you all impressed? I just knew him from TV. I don't know. He was a tragic character. It was the 2000s when I learned who he was. This trashy guy with the large clock around his neck from TV. It's kind of the same fate that Ozzy Osbourne fell on for me. He was that weird old guy from TV. So it was also y'all that got me to sit down and check out Black Sabbath and really start to understand how rad and disruptive that music was too. And that's the other context I have to work so hard to get through. I can't imagine what it was like when this music was dangerous, that the establishment was scared by Public Enemy, that there was a song about incarceration and how the establishment treats Black men was groundbreaking. I see artists that paint the same pictures today, and it's not like that. We have mainstreamed and commodified music itself, and it feels like an erasure of the experiences that Public Enemy rapped about and an erasure of the groundbreaking work itself. And it's a big thought to think about, and I have to sit with it some more. I found it really worthwhile to just listen to this a few extra times to really get what it's about, to read the lyrics and think about what it was like to hear these stories for the first time and hear these beats as they were intended to. And it's good. I love it. And I really appreciate you guys picking this one out for us to enjoy. My final rating is 10 sincere, yeah, boy, out of 10. That's you, Scott.
Is it my turn? Yes. Okay. Hey, everybody. I'm very humbled to be here. And I was just writing a lot of notes from what Amy was just saying. And I am in no way qualified to talk about this album. I feel very underqualified. Growing up in early 80s, Midwestern AM and FM culture, we had no reference point. We did have the early Sugar Hill Gang records. We did have Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, but it was random. It was stuff I found at the record store by random. And even into college in the mid 80s, it was very random. Def Jam changed everything. Russell Simmons and Rick Rubin, they changed everything when they came out and put the Beastie Boys out, which came out before this, and LL Cool J was coming out. Rick referenced the Less Than Zero soundtrack that came out. Those were the things that really began to put things into the marketplace in a manner that was accessible to wider audiences. But still, in white Christian South America, it was a novelty. It wasn't on the radio. I was in Christian music at the time, and they didn't know what to do it. I remember sitting at a conference table, and in walked Brentwood Records with Stephen Wiley and the Bible Break. It was a hideous copy of a rap song from the secular world trying to make it on Christian radio. And it really wasn't until later, until I saw Public Enemy open the Zoo TV tour for U2 that, even watching them on stage, I was like, yeah. And it was years after that before I had any concept what hip hop was. It was because I was within moralists who deemed all of it gangster rap. It was, when Rodney King happened, it was east to west gangsters, and all of it was evil and all of it was bad. But Public Enemy came out, and The Chronic came out later in the early 90s. Snoop Dogg came out later. And the thing, as I kind of grew out and became a normal human being, the thing that impresses me so much with these early rap records is how they were produced, how they were mixed, the samples. I was looking at the list of samples, and the one that sticks out to me is the Terminator X album, that just right in the mix of it is Flash's theme from the Flash Gordon soundtrack. And if you go and look at how they're just not rapping over music and other records, they are methodically piecing these together with the Bomb Squad and putting them together and making these samples into music for the masses. And the rappers today are not doing that. I think Chuck D, I read some things recently and from years back of him. He's one of these guys who, once rap went corporate, it changed the beast. And back then, they were pioneers and were really the glue to taking that thing that actually began in the 60s of mixing over rapping into the masses. And this album, I've really enjoyed getting into it. I've really enjoyed listening to some of their other music as well. And I am okay. I think we have to sometimes reconcile with our past. Sometimes we have to repent from our past, but I have no qualm whatsoever. I'm very happy that I'm able to go back and learn where these musics came from and how we got to where we are today. And Public Enemy is right there, and they are one of the heroes of that. Def Jam Records absolutely, again, changed the game, and Public Enemy was a huge part of that. That's really all I got to say. Thank you very much.
I was born in Chicago, Illinois, moved to Cleveland, Ohio when I was about 3, and moved to Detroit, Michigan when I was 14. And my parents raised me specifically in predominantly Black communities. We were bused from the white neighborhood, even in Shaker Heights, to the Black neighborhood to go to a predominantly Black elementary school. All of my male friends, same gender friends in elementary school, were Black, and their music influenced me. I was getting turned on to funk and disco and the very earliest rap records right as they were coming out. Hotel, Motel, Holiday Inn. Yeah, Scott Winchell mentioned the Sugar Hill Gang. When I moved to Detroit, I lived in Southfield, a multicultural suburb just on the border of 8 Mile. Yes, that 8 Mile road. And after dropping out of a liberal arts school in Ohio, I moved to the inner city of Detroit at 20 years of age as a college dropout in late 1987. And then this happened in 1988. And I was living kind of almost on the streets. I wasn't houseless, but I was living adjacent to the people who were houseless. I was seeing the poverty, the crack cocaine, the sweet wine, the Mad Dog 2020. We would get the 40 ounce of malt liquor and sit on the stoop and drink the 40 ounce of malt liquor. We knew about the gangs, Young Boys Incorporated, the gun and violence crisis in Detroit at the time was insane. And then we had KRS-One dropped Stop the Violence in hip hop. I'm afraid that we aren't capable of comprehending the urgency and the righteousness of this record today, even though we live in a more urgent time, a time that calls for this righteousness even more profoundly, living as we are in the post George Floyd period. The issues that Public Enemy raised about systemic racism, white supremacy, mass incarceration, all of it to today, to a point, would make me shudder. I feel, in a way, I'm trying to paraphrase Utah Phillips, the great American hobo folk singer, that it was easier then to say who the enemy was than in the waning days of Babylon. We're in a trippy ass time right now, and I think for some reason I didn't receive as much as I wanted to receive Combat Rock, our record club #1, The Waterboys, a record that's so near and dear to my heart, record club 2, and of course I curated Purple Rain by Prince. I was trying to receive all those, but when I went and listened to It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back this week in preparation for tonight, I received it in a way I hadn't received the others, where I was catapulted, in a time machine, and it was freaky to get sent down into my youth. And I think partly it has to do with the fact that I'm actually right now doing a lot of writing that takes place in the 90s and takes place. The story I'm trying to write starts in Detroit. It's going to go on the road and maybe end up in Tennessee. We'll see. I haven't gotten that far in the story yet, but I was taken back in my heart to what it was like living in multiple apartments in Detroit, and who I was. We lived in a squat, and how influential this was. And we were anarchists, and our friends were communists, and they got me. I remember Scott, the Commie Scott, we called him. I don't know if there's other people got me listening to this record, but Commie Scott got me listening to this record. This is what I looked like around that time. I have a African colored beanie on. I've got the John Lennon glasses. I've got a scraggly beard, and I've got dreadlocks and a keffiyeh. And I was trying to be all the things. I was trying to be every iteration of counterculture rebellion that I could fuse into one expression. We were anticipating that everything that this record was about was going to go down. And when they sing about the CIA tapping my telephone, I mean, I was sure that the secret police were just waiting to clamp down on me and my friends. And it was just a couple years after this record happened that friends of ours and I were arrested on multiple occasions in Detroit, and got to spend time in the hospital in Detroit after being brutally beaten almost to my death, simply for riding my bike in the wrong neighborhood. And I lived in the wrong neighborhood for a person of my complexion, and I have absolutely no regrets for doing this. And so I'd forgotten how much this record had been a soundtrack to my downward mobility and my choice to be a white anti-racist in solidarity back then. And I fail at it every day, but also I participate in it every day. I participate in that solidarity every day. I cannot wait for Gus Creeder to take us home on this album. It takes a nation of millions to hold us back. You weren't born yet, but I know you've got something to say about this record.
Well, I hope everyone is doing well. Yeah, most of what I would want to say has been addressed so eloquently. And yeah, I mean, I've had so much fun going back and listening to this album. I have kind of a fun history with it, where like the first Public Enemy I ever heard was Fight the Power. And it was very early into me personally getting into hip hop in my own, like you know, in my own time. I was super lucky, whether it be due to the popification of rap in the 2000s or whatever other reason. I was very lucky to be raised on a lot of hip hop, and it was really the first genre where when I started exploring new music, it's where I landed, because it was always the most fun for me. It was very rhythmic. It made a lot of sense, and I enjoyed a lot of the bravado in it. I kind of understood it in a different way from a lot of other music. And this album was one of the first ones that first rap albums I listened to front to back on my own accord, because I knew it was such a classic. And then, you know, eventually I started getting into newer artists, people who were still releasing music, and I was getting excited about rollouts and all of this. So it sort of fell in the background for me. So I've had such a good time revisiting it these last couple weeks. And again, most of what I would have wanted to say has been said very well. So I'll just I'm just going to talk about how well I think this thing is aged. Yeah, this record, of course, they were signed to Def Jam. Some of the earlier artists signed. They were signed in '86, I believe. Def Jam formed from Rick Rubin and Russell Simmons in '84. Then this album released in '88. And I mean, I just think Chuck D is one of the most incredibly gifted MCs technically of that era. I mean, it was a time where rap was still really figuring, like finding its footing, figuring everything out. Again, pre the Chronic, rap was very different. So having Chuck D as this incredible lyricist alongside Flava Flav, who really is the quintessential hype man. He's so fun to hear. And like on songs like Don't Believe the Hype, his hook is so great. I love the following track, Cold Lampin' with Flavor. There's just so much personality, and the way that he works as a foil to Chuck D in this album is so awesome. I love his part on Party for Your Right to Fight. I think that Chuck D is incredible throughout this whole record. It's not like Flavor has any performances that necessarily overtake Chuck's, but the way that they can come together is really impressive to me. There's the thing that kind of blew my mind the most that we've talked about here is the production. I mean, you have the Bomb Squad all over this. It is it was addressed that, like, you know, when you hear a Public Enemy song, because there was just nobody else who could really produce in the way that they could at that point. The samples are so tight and intertwined and interesting. The keys on Black Steel and Hour of Chaos, I like really picked up on the keys the last time I listened, and it's like such an addicting track, which follows Night of the Living Bassheads with that sax sample that has just kept me going back. That's become one of my favorites. But yeah, I've had so much fun going back into this album, and I look forward to doing more research on it, because I also feel like I'm a little bit I'm not necessarily qualified to talk about this album to a certain extent. Where I think it's fair for me as a fan of the genre to acknowledge how important it is and necessary. Even when you look at the flows that Chuck D uses on these beats, there are flows that are so uncanny that you can kind of trace a through line to other lyrical or conscious rappers in the future. But yeah, don't know that I'm super qualified to talk about this album, but I very much so have adored going into it. And yeah, there are things like a lot of people who are mentioned who have sort of different contexts now, I believe, than they did before with how some of their words are taken, that I look forward to figuring out a little bit more about this point in history as I go forward, because I plan on writing about this genre for the rest of my working life. So the more that I know, the better. And I am really grateful for this opportunity to go back into this album and pick it apart a little bit more and understand its necessary place in hip hop. And yeah, that's about it. But again, I'm just real grateful that I got to do this, because this album is really it is really incredible. It's such a fun listen, and it goes by real quick. Like these songs aren't short and they aren't light in content, but it is a very easy album to listen to, and one that, yeah, if you are at all skeptical on the qualifications of hip hop as a musical genre and think of it as any less than any other genre, then this is an album that you should definitely go to expand your mind a little bit, expand your thinking. But yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I was taken by how real it felt, and it moved me, and it moved my body, and my body went with it completely.
Yeah.
We are always so grateful for our youngest music nerd, Gus Creeder. I'm just going to remind everybody that we are on the Music Nerds Record Club number 4. It's April the 15th, 2024. I'm your convener, teacher on the radio. And in the second half of the episode, we always just share a little bit about our current listening. That can be new releases, or it can be stuff that you're just listening to currently. And we're going to tip over to Scott Winchell to keep us rolling.
Hey. Man, I've been really enjoying just spending a lot of time on really, really good albums. There's so much great music out there this year, and I'm just finding myself unable to move on from a few of the albums that are out, and they're all over the board. This last week, Maggie Rogers put out a record that's really, really good. Enjoying that. It's just a nice, poppy, upbeat album, in my opinion. Cedric Burnside, blues artist. He's really good. I've been spending time with that. But the ones that are just getting me, the Vampire Weekend album, I can't move on. It sounds incredible. It goes through my brain and it's just wonderful. I actually do a lot of sleep music, and to go to bed. That's a great go to sleep album. It'll put you out, and it's not because it's boring. Yeah, I think they meant it to be brain stimulating and put you into that. And so Vampire Weekend, when Casey Musgraves put out Deeper Well, one thing that stuck out to me is how good it started. I was like, wow, whoever sat down and sequenced that album, they deserve a raise. And it starts with such a pop and a great opening song called Cardinal. And it made me think about other albums that just started so well. The Waxahachie does too. It just, what a great first song. And so I went back into my history and I found I was just kind of goofing off and looking back at old albums from my teenage years. Devo's New Traditionalists, I've listened to that like 10 times in a couple of weeks. It starts really, really cool. It's a song called We're Through Being Cool. And it's just a great album sequence-wise. So other things that I've really enjoyed lately, Sierra Farrell. I think she's just entertaining, and she's just wonderful. Really, 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 really cool album. And I love following her on social media. There's no one like her out there. The new Black Crows is good. It's nice to talk about them in a manner that they put out a great record. And one I stumbled across that might be of interest to some of you is this Nick Cave and Warren Ellis album that they did for the Amy Winehouse film, Back to Black. They did the score for it, and it's really cool too. Brittany Howard, Not Getting Old. So that's a few things I'm listening to. More coming. We're getting just deluged with a lot of great releases. So that's it for me.
All right. So since we've been focusing this evening on some New York rap, I thought I'd throw another one into into conversation. It's one that was just recently, I believe, released last year, but just put on streaming this past weekend, called Liberation 2 by the incredible Talib Kweli, one of New York's absolute best. This album, it is conscious, it is groovy. It's one that, like, I've known Kweli since since early in my hip hop listening. He was featured on a lot of projects that I really loved, and I could see him as an incredible lyricist. But it's one that really makes me want to get more into the back catalog, because it is a modern project and he sounds as hungry as ever. The commentary is there and it's beautiful, and I've really, really enjoyed that. And then another one that I've been listening to, not necessarily in one sitting, because it's quite long. But hey, I've been needing some jazz recently, and I have just been repeatedly going back to Kamasi Washington's The Epic. It's 3 discs, it's about 3 hours long, and if you ever want to just pop in for a little bit and get a couple of incredible modern jazz performances, one of the best saxophone players alive, then check that out. And then I also brought some records, a couple I've picked up recently, and others that I've just been spinning quite a bit. One is one that has also been pretty famously not on streaming platforms. Frank Ocean's Endless. This was released. This is a very fun story behind this album coming out. It was released the day before his hit album Blonde, as a way to get out of his bad deal with Def Jam. And yeah, it's an awesome album, super underrated, because he followed it with Blonde, which is just one of the best, my eyes, one of the best albums of the last decade. As well, in the same trip, I picked up one that I can't believe I didn't have yet, because it's just one of my favorites. I got David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust. It's Ziggy Stardust. Not too much to say there. It's one of the best. Another one that's from an artist that I just adore, that I've talked about with you guys before, is King Cruel. And listening to the Ooze, it's probably my favorite King Cruel album. It's not as polished or put together as the last two, Man Alive or Space Heavy, but it is just like the vocals, the atmosphere that it builds is really something to me. And then one of my favorite artists, one of my favorite rappers, producers, singers, songwriters is Tyler, the Creator, who is sort of had an incredible Coachella performance the other night and is kind of starting to tease a little bit, I think, at a rollout for next year for a new project. So I've been going back to some of his older catalog. Wolf in particular, this is his sophomore album, and it's one where a lot of people see his true artistic peak as 2017 and after with his album Flower Boy. But I mean, this album is so fun. It's younger Tyler. It's raunchy. It definitely has moments that verbiage wise haven't aged well, but as a cohesive listen, it is such a fun rap project. It's really cool to see to really see the evolution, because you can tell that there's some greatness about to come down the line, and this is the album that really proves that to me. But yeah, and then on top of a million other albums, a lot of new releases that I'm gonna hide a little bit, because I'm excited to share them, and I hope I can share some that you guys haven't heard of at the end of the year. But yeah, that's basically what I've been listening to recently.
Yay, good music. I've been kind of singularly focused on what I've been listening to lately. On Friday, I got to go to the record release and a short performance at Grimey's for Aaron Lee Tasjan's new album, Stellar Evolution. He's just the sweetest person, and this album is really knocking my socks off. Andy actually shared one of the songs in our group chat the other day. It's called I Love America Better Than You, and it's kind of a fun jingly song, but also has a verse about like someone having PTSD from being in war. And so it's just very kind of covers a lot of areas, but just is tied together in this very sweet sonic space that really tickles me the right way. I went on about a song or two from this album last month, so you know where I'm at. This is my album recommendation for this month. The next thing on my mind is Shaky Knees, which is my favorite music festival that's going on in Atlanta, May 3rd through the 5th. So that's just like 2 weeks away. So I am spending the next 2 weeks digging through the undercard, seeing what else is on there, and thinking about the horrible decisions of the conflicts. I wrote down a few for y'all to consider. We have Dinosaur Jr. against Waxahachie. That's a tough one for me. I've seen Dinosaur Jr. before. Waxahachie is good. I know y'all are stoked on the new Waxahachie album. Sunny Day Real Estate versus The Offspring. And I love The Offspring, one of my all-time favorites. I'm afraid the friends I'm going with are going to be way more stoked for Sunny Day Real Estate, though. So we'll see if I have to go see that by myself. And my tough decision is Queens of the Stone Age, who I missed seeing live on their tour last year, which was kind of disappointing. But they're playing against Mike Snow, one of my all-time favorite electronic production kind of dancey artists. They don't even have anything new that I know of, so it's like super hard to miss that. I've seen Queens twice before. Yeah, I saw them at Shaky Knees a few years ago too. But we have Weezer and Foo Fighters on the headlines. It's going to be a really fun weekend. Chicano Batman's going to be there. Men I Trust. Super stoked. Always a great time. Come join me. Shaky Knees. That's all I have really going. I'll pass it off.
Whew, those are some tough choices, Amy. But it sounds like an incredible lineup. What am I listening to right now? I wanted to start with some older stuff that I am discovering for the first time. One of the fun things about digging through vinyl is finding some treasures that I may not have that may have passed over when I was a kid, when I was busy listening to bubblegum pop. But discovering it later in life and finding little interesting things about it. And some of the stuff just sounds great, the way they mastered it. But I've been getting into Santana recently. I picked up Santana 3 the other day. And it's just a feast for the senses. But one of the serendipitous things for me, some of you probably already know this, but it features a 17-year-old Neil Schon who would go on to found the band Journey. But it's just an interesting juxtaposition with him and Carlos Santana. Just some great sounds altogether. One of the things that I'm listening to that just came out last Friday is Sun Without the Heat by Layla McCalla. And, Andrew and I have seen Layla McCalla at the Ryman, an incredibly gifted musician, part of the Our Native Daughters collective with Rhiannon Giddens, Allison Russell, and Amethyst Kia. And I think she is just on the verge of breaking out in a big way. Such complex rhythms and heartfelt songs. So I've been listening to that. But the main thing that's had me captivated, and it, like our album discussion tonight, that it takes a nation of millions to hold us back, just kind of takes you deep and deeper into layer after layer of history and music and things pulled together. But I am loving Cowboy Carter. It is an education. It is a feast. It's just an incredible array of genres and talent and I don't know. It's a strong contender right now for me for album of the year. But those are some of the things that I'm listening to right now.
Thanks, Rick. I spent some time with Cowboy Carter as well recently, and I don't know if I'm going to return to it or not, but I'm glad I spent time with it. It's an important record for two reasons. Number one, it's going to piss off a lot of really stupid people, and it's going to inspire a lot of the Beehive to check out some country music, and that's always awesome. I wish that Dolly and Willie would have done something more a little collaborative instead of doing the little introduction sketchy things. But overall, worth your while and a really cool just hybrid of styles, a lot of American roots music, more so than the quote unquote country record that people think it is. Okay, what I'm listening to. So, way back in 2017, the weekend that Orange Thanos was inaugurated, and I just, it was hard for me to move. And I had my first colonoscopy on the day of the inauguration, and that was the least invasive thing that happened to me. 2 days later, my friend Laurel was like, get your ass out of the house. Come join me at the Thirsty Beaver. And I'm glad, because that was the first time I saw Sarah Shook and the Disarmers. Rock solid singer-songwriter, has evolved from just being just quality honky-tonk and alt country to just really being one of the better singer-songwriters out there. Revelations is their latest. By the way, Sarah is technically now River. They are still called Sarah Shook and the Disarmers. Going back to maybe 5-6 years ago at the Lincoln Theater Saturday night, and my first time seeing Chicano Batman. I love these guys. Notebook Fantasy is their new record. Even when I heard the first single Fly back in February, I'm like, that's going to be my summer jam. The rest of the record, like this and the Sarah Shook and the Disarmers record, I'm still processing it, but there's just a lot of great, what I like to call 70s Saturday afternoon soul vibes on this record. And that, I think I just accidentally muted myself there. The band that opened for Chicano Batman, when I saw them, I wasn't sure what to expect. What I got was Krungbin, Ala Sala. Just, I consistently love these guys. I am a sucker for really great, funky instrumentals, which is why Krungbin, Delvon Lamar Organ Trio, bands like that are always going to be at the top of my stack. I was saying to Andy recently that, that the new Krungbin's good, but the real strength, the secret sauce lies in their live performance. That's when the songs really come to life. But, it's a great record to throw on, if you need sung in the background, or if you need something that's maybe tickles your brain a little bit. Next up, the great Alejandro Escovedo. Echo Dancing is a collection of him reworking songs from his past. That means songs from his earlier solo albums, songs from when he was in the True Believers, from Buick McCain. It's all there, and he just radically reworks this stuff. I have only listened to it once and looking forward to spending more time with it. But at the top of the heap, album number 13 from Old 97s, straight out of Dallas, American Primitive. Both Stephen King and Nick Offerman love this record, and they said so before the record even dropped. I love the Old 97s. They make two kinds of albums. Good albums, great albums. This is a great album. Their last two, good, not bad. Produced by Tucker Martine, best known for his work with people like the Decemberists. Even Peter Buck shows up. Rhett Miller is one of the more underrated singer-songwriters working today. And the Old 97s, I'm like, they are kicking up a storm like they should be on this record. And having only listened to it a couple of times, I love it. And I'm just looking forward to what other surprises this will reveal upon further listening. And back to you, Andy.
Well, you all were so good with your time. We're going to have a couple minutes at the end for a communal group chat. I definitely co-sign stuff I've been hearing about, such as River Shook's new Sarah Shook and the Disarmers record. Definitely I'm friends to the Beyonce thing that's happening, though it's not been at my top. And I went through a big punk thing in February, and I got really into the new Green Day and the new Laura Jane Grace. Got to go see Laura Jane Grace. Went and found a new punk band that out of Atlanta I'd never heard of called New Junk City. And I was really happy. Everybody who's just only listened to one of our YouTubes, the Music Nerds Record Club, has an ongoing group chat, and we just start just spitting stuff in there. Sometimes we even make fun of each other. And Amy Rock mentioned that I might be leaving my bluegrass folk country phase for a punk phase, and I am definitely indulging that. But like Amy, also I allow my concert calendar to help dictate my listening habits. And I've got I'm going to my first Merle Fest, which is a traditional music festival in Wilkesboro, North Carolina. And then I'm also hitting up the High Water Festival in South Carolina. So I've been allowing that and I'm hitting up Tyler Childers at the Bridgestone. Rick, in just 4 days, I'm going to be with our guy, Tyler. But there's some stuff on my listenings. First of all, I hyped earlier this year the new album by Willie Carlisle, Critterland, but I had a Willie weekend. I had a Willie weekend this past weekend, so I started listening to Critterland again, and it is probably locking itself into number one for the year. That's never happened to me before. I usually make that decision the day before our live stream in December, and Linda Segarra is probably holding on to number 2 with Hooray for the Refresh. So here's some other new stuff that's come out that I have not heard mentioned yet by you all. Forgive me if it was. Mantras by Katie Pruitt, literally blowing my mind. My friends need a new mantra every day. She deals with being queer. She deals with some gender. There's a song about the bodies of boys versus the bodies of girls. It's a lot about sobriety and a lot about being a queer, presenting as a woman in this society. Really phenomenal album lyrically for me. Lyrically and musically, just put me on the floor as a folk album is the new John Moreland called Visitor. There isn't anything about that album bad I can say, and it's devastatingly intimate and scathing lyrically, even some politically scathing parts of it that just blew my mind. And also lyrically similar and stripped down is Will Hoge. And I think in the huge Americana revival that we're having today, Will Hoge seems to sometimes get pushed to the side or forgotten about in terms of like the it artists in folk and Americana. But the new Will Hoge album, Tenderhearted Boys, absolutely blew my mind. Now, I know Scott Greenberg was there when I first discovered cowpunk. And for us, I think the primary cowpunk bands were Lone Justice and Jason and the Scorchers. Jason Ringenberg has a duet album out with Victoria Lidkey that I haven't seen in any. I'm in like 5 different folk Americana music groups. I don't see anybody's mentioned that album. It's called More Than Words Can Tell, and it's very homey, almost cheesy, sing along. It's a true like folk revival sounding album. Like you remember in the 60s. Well, we don't a lot of us. Rick remembers. He was old enough, but like in the 60s when there was the folk revival and there was actually people doing a folk revival thing. That's what this Jason Ringenberg album is. I haven't heard anybody mention the new Phosphorescent. It's called Relevator Phosphorescent, one of my favorite groups. And then I've discovered again, reminded myself again that there's a British Americana scene and 2 albums. I think these are both from people overseas. One's called Everything's Changed by the Real Sarahs. And then another one is called Howl by True Foxes. And that's just, and then also I co-sign everything that's been said about Maggie Rogers, Aaron Lee Tajan, Sierra Farrell. I don't know if anybody's mentioned Waxahachie today, but definitely I'm all over that River Shook album. And I just as a pro tip, if you're this much of a nerd, and we are the music nerds, but I subscribed and re-updated my app and put it on my phone and on my computer for Last FM's Scrobbling, and Last FM scrobbles your listening habits in real time if your primary thing is streaming. Now I see that a lot of y'all are doing this OG with the CD and the vinyl, and don't let me influence you away from that. That's pretty legit. But I do listen primarily on the phone, and so at any interval in time, I can see where my listening habits are. There's one album that should have been on there based on my listening habits on the list I posted on Facebook, and I talked to Rick about talking about this communally on social media, and I'm scared to mention it, but I listened to the Oliver Anthony album last week and actually was pretty impressed with it musically for the most part. Lyrically, there's no fudge rounds, but the fudge rounds have been replaced with the eating the bugs or something. There's definitely some pandering to his bass, but it's produced by Dave Cobb, I think he worked with Sturgill and Isbell and Chris Stapleton. And I mean, Dave Cobb's a beast, and the record sounds really, really good to me. It reminds me of OG Johnny Cash, especially the way he reads the Bible in between songs, but it's musically it's not intimidating. It's emotional and vulnerable musically. But I hate that I live in a world where I'm scared to even make a post that I was, I had contempt before investigation. I had already judged it as evil before I'd even listened to it. So let's go. Let's go to round robin. 30 seconds to a minute. Closing thoughts on Public Enemy, on the new releases, where we're going next. Our next one will either be May the 13th or May the 20th if we stick with the Monday schedule, which I'm going to lobby for. We had been on a Saturday schedule, but I think Monday nights is a great time to do this. So y'all, why don't we go around the Hollywood squares? Last words, Greenberg?
I don't really have anything left to say. I was racking my brain. It's like, did we talk about Waxahachie and Casey Musgraves last time? I think we did, because absolutely they're on the list. But there's just so much music and not enough time in the day.
Amy, what do you got for us?
Not too much. I really enjoyed our discussion of the Public Enemy album. Like I said during my review, just really cool to get to sit down with an album that I never had a chance to discover on my own.
Hey, Winchell, what shows? Scott Winchell, don't you have some big heavy metal shows coming up or something?
Yeah, Judas Priest, baby, Huntsville coming up. Gonna get it. Yeah. Hey, there's a really good album by a guy named Bochner, Dan Bochner. And heck if I know, it just came in my feed. It's really cool. And we sometimes miss legacy acts. We think of legacy acts as Journey and Foreigner sometimes. Nope. The Church has a new album out that is okay. And Jesus and Mary Chain have an album out. That one, hey, it's there. And I agree with Rick. I picked up my Beyonce vinyl yesterday. It is a special album, and I find it interesting when I look back at, like we talked about, Public Enemy, and then a few years later, The Chronic came out with Dr. Dre, and that album, The Chronic, did to rap what it just has a similar vibe. What it did to that world, what Beyonce's this album is doing in the same manner. I mean, very different, very different. I'm not trying to say it's the same. It's kind of like when I compared Casey Musgraves' new album to Blood on the Tracks to Dylan. It's the same thing vibe-wise, and it's interesting. So, man, listen to more music, and if you don't like something, there's something else you will.
Gus?
Yeah, this has been such a joy, as always. It's been so much fun. I love talking about Takes a Nation of Millions. I'm also going to jump on the Beyonce love train. I wrote an article this past issue for the Oracle about the Beyonce album, and it was so much fun to dive into. I think it's awesome. Yeah, it's just been great. I've had such a great time with you guys, as per, and I look forward to whatever our next record is.
So I guess it's me. Gus, I'm glad that you and Scott also brought up the track "Party for Your Right to Fight" is just amazing, and you're right about Flavor Flav's thing on that. I think one of the things that blew me away about that is listening to it on headphones and hearing one in one channel and one in the other, and Flavor Flav is like maybe a quarter of a second out of sync. It's just brilliant. The way that it pulls you through. It has been a blast. Thanks for indulging me to talk with y'all about this album. It's been fun.
It's a really good record. Goodness.
We've had a good time. Another hour has flown by, and it looks like this thing is here to stay. We're the Music Nerds Record Club. We get on a live stream once a month. One of us picks an iconic album from our past, from the world and America and music listeners everywhere's past. We discuss an iconic album for 30 minutes, and we discuss what our current thing is right now. I think there's a new Taylor Swift on Friday, so I'm sure Rick will have to listen to that. So, and anybody else. So we'll see you in a month ish. And thanks everybody for joining the Music Nerds Record Club. And these stay on YouTube forever. I've heard the internet never goes away, so it'll be up there on YouTube. You can share the link with your friends. Thanks for listening and watching.